Arthur Schopenhauer, the grumpy granddaddy of pessimism. He wasn't just a philosopher, he was philosophy's permanent bad mood. Born in 1788 in Germany, he grew up in a wealthy merchant family, but his dad died young, and Arthur inherited both money and a lifelong case of melancholy. Instead of chasing politics or fortune like his rivals, Schopenhauer dedicated his whole career to explaining why life feels like chewing glass. At the center of his ideas is the concept of the will, an irrational, blind force that drives everything in the universe. Sounds fancy, but in practice it means your desires are like a slot machine rigged to never pay out. You chase things, love, success, happiness, but once you get them, you either get bored or want more. Rinse and repeat until death. As he put it, life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. So what about kids? For Schopenhauer, creating new life was basically tricking someone into entering a carnival where every ride is pain-themed and the exit is death. Parenting, in his view, was not noble. It was extending the world's suffering by one more innocent victim. Or, as he might have said, congratulations, you've just gifted your child a VIP pass to disappointment. Schopenhauer's personal life matched his worldview. He quarreled with his peers, lectured in mostly empty classrooms while everyone rushed to hear his rival Hegel, and he lived alone with a poodle he literally named Atma, meaning world soul. Yes, man hated humanity, but adored his dog. The long-term impact? Massive. Though ignored in his lifetime, Schopenhauer's works, especially The World as Will and Representation, inspired Nietzsche, Freud, Wagner, Tolstoy, Einstein, even modern psychology. His antinatalist tone planted seeds for later pessimistic and existential philosophies, making him the emo grandfather of antinatalism. His legacy is proof that one man's gloom can fuel centuries of thought. Ultimately, his philosophy can be summed up like this: life is suffering, desire is a scam, and if you must exist, at least adopt a dog. Emil Cioran, the poet of despair. If most philosophers make you yawn, Emil Cioran makes you sigh dramatically while staring out a window. Born in Romania in 1911 and later based in Paris, Cioran didn't bother pretending life had meaning. He just turned emptiness into art. Unlike Schopenhauer's grumpiness or Zaffe's clinical diagnosis, Cioran wrote about despair with the elegance of a love poet who was dating misery itself. He became famous for his little bombs of wisdom, aphorisms, dense one-liners like, "It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late." Instead of long systems of philosophy, Cioran preferred compact punches, turning gloom into something almost intoxicating. If nihilism had a marketing department, he was its Madison Avenue. Cioran's central message was simple: life is futile. Hope, illusion, progress, joke, existence, a beautiful, tragic accident. But instead of burying you under morbid arguments, he made despair seductive, almost sensual. It's why people called him a poet of despair. He didn't yell life is meaningless at you. He whispered it like a secret. Some context: during the 1930s in Romania, he flirted with nationalism, a controversial stain on his biography. But by the time he moved to France, he denounced politics altogether. He published works like On the Heights of Despair, The Trouble with Being Born, and A Short History of Decay. Each book reads less like academic philosophy and more like a diary written by the world's most articulate insomniac at 3 a.m. And the long-term impact? Massive. Today, Cioran is a cult favorite among artists, writers, and moody students who underline his lines in cafes while pretending not to cry into their espresso. His style of existential poetry kept antinatalism and nihilism alive for audiences who might skip dense treatises but binge Instagram captions. In short, while other philosophers explained why life hurts, Cioran made you fall in love with the hurt. He was despair's jazz musician, improvising sadness into beauty, and then ghosting you with a perfectly phrased goodbye. Philip Mainlander, the philosopher who wanted the universe to rest in peace. If Schopenhauer was philosophy's resident pessimist, Philipp Mainlander was the guy who said, "Hold my funeral urn." Born in Germany in 1841, Mainlander lived only 34 years, but he packed into them enough darkness to make Edgar Allan Poe look upbeat. Mainlander agreed with Schopenhauer that life is fueled by suffering, but then he cranked the volume way up. Instead of life wanting to survive, he claimed the entire universe is slowly committing suicide. For him, existence wasn't a gift, it was a death march. Stars burn out, organisms decay, even galaxies collapse. In other words, the cosmos isn't expanding on some grand mission, it's just winding down one depressing tick at a time. So why is birth bad? Because every new person dragged into the world is caught in that same irreversible decline toward non-existence. Mainlander saw procreation not as a miracle, but as tossing another passenger onto a sinking ship. His masterpiece, The Philosophy of Redemption, runs over 1,000 pages and reads like an encyclopedia of doom. Life equals pain, death equals release. Simple math, really. And he thought non-existence was the redemption we should all be rooting for. Sadly, Mainlander practiced what he preached. After finishing his magnum opus in 1876, he promptly ended his own life before the book even reached most readers. Yet, ironically, his ideas kept living. Later existential and nihilistic thinkers drew from him the sense that the universe has no upward arc, only entropy and decay. His fingerprints show up in 20th century pessimism, in the way people talk about heat death of a universe, and even in environmental doomsayers today. Mainlander's long-term impact? He gave antinatalism its most cosmic twist. Not just don't have kids, but by being born, you're colluding with the universe's self-annihilation. One could say he wasn't anti-life. He was simply pro-rest in peace for everything. Sarah Perry, the pragmatic antinatalist. If Schopenhauer sounded like a gloomy opera and Benatar like a courtroom debate, Sarah Perry is more like a smart podcast you can play while making dinner. Instead of abstract doom, she takes antinatalism straight into everyday reasoning. Perry argues that the problem with life isn't just logical or cosmic, it's painfully ordinary. Think bills you never agreed to, bad bosses you didn't apply for, and a body that comes with warranty issues you can't return. For her, antinatalism isn't about abstract theories of entropy. It's about looking at daily life and admitting, this isn't worth replicating. What makes Perry stand out is her language. She talks in crisp, modern cultural takes, writing essays and commentary that make pessimism feel oddly refreshing, like philosophy, but without the academic maze. Instead of wrapping antinatalism in 1,000 pages of German gloom, she makes it sound as practical as saying, maybe don't drag someone else into this mess. She even brings her lens into cultural critique. The pressures of the nuclear family, runaway consumption, or society's obsession with optimism. For Perry, choosing not to have kids is not some dramatic rebellion. It's like choosing vegan tacos, a rational, ethical lifestyle decision that just happens to save an innocent being from suffering. Her importance? She revives the message for a new audience, bloggers, millennials, modern culture critics, and makes antinatalism sound conversational rather than funereal. In a world full of Benatars and Zapffes, Perry's voice says, look, you don't need a degree in doom to realize forcing another life in here might not be kind. 10. Herman Tonnesen, the why exist at all guy. If Zapffe diagnosed life as a hopeless accident, his student Herman Tonnesen asked the even bigger follow-up question. Wait, why should existence even exist at all? Born in 1918 in Norway, Tonnesen carried Zapf's torch, but with an extra dose of radical honesty. His contribution was the last Messiah debates in philosophy circles, where he basically pressed humanity's existential, are you sure you want to exist? Pop-up box. Instead of just asking if procreation was moral, he flipped the table. Could any form of conscious life ever be justified? If the premise of life is guaranteed suffering, then maybe the most rational position isn't don't have kids, it's maybe the universe never should have booted up to begin with. Tonnesen became a kind of pure pessimist philosopher, a bridge figure between Zapf's coping strategies and later antinatalists. His writings aren't as famous as Benatar, but among hardcore thinkers he's legendary for confronting the root problem head-on. Not whether life is hard, but why we accept existing at all without signed consent. Impact-wise, Tonnesen hasn't gone mainstream, but he's a cult influence in existential and pessimistic thought. He asks the questions most people are too scared to stare at, like the human version of holding a blinking cursor over the delete save file. Option. His legacy? A philosopher who didn't just challenge parenthood. He challenged the audacity of the universe itself. Peter Wessel Zapffe, the Norwegian existential buzzkill. He was Norway's official ambassador of gloom. Born in 1899, he was not only a philosopher, but also a mountaineer, lawyer, and writer. Basically a Renaissance man, if the Renaissance had been hosted on a rainy Tuesday with no snacks. Zapf's big idea: humans are a tragic accident of evolution. We were over-equipped with consciousness. In other words, we became self-aware enough to realize that life is meaningless, but not wise enough to shrug it off. So, how do people cope with this unbearable truth? Zapffe famously laid out 4 coping strategies. The psychological duct tape that stops us from collapsing into existential despair. Isolation. We avoid sad facts like death, suffering, and the news. Anchoring. We latch onto things like religion, tradition, or the American dream. Distraction. Endless hobbies, scrolling TikTok, binge-watching shows about people baking cakes shaped like toilets. Sublimation, turning our suffering into art, poetry, or that indie song you play when it's raining. In short, humans invented culture, entertainment, and whole belief systems just to run from the cosmic joke. For Zapffe, the cruel irony is that life is basically unlivable without tricks and illusions. And what was his solution? Well, Zapffe didn't suggest therapy or self-help books. His ultimate life hack was simple: don't reproduce. If new humans didn't arrive at the party, there'd be fewer minds tortured by their own awareness. For him, antinatalism wasn't just philosophy, it was mercy. His impact, immense. Later, antinatalist thinkers like David Benatar openly drew from Zaffe's framework, and modern existentialists cite him whenever they want to prove that Netflix binges aren't just fun, they're survival mechanisms. He took doom scrolling and gave it academic legitimacy. Zaffe's legacy is clear. Life is absurd, and humans survive by lying to themselves. And his final advice to humanity? Don't invite more guests to the circus, especially since the clowns are already crying. David Benatar, the modern face of antinatalism. If antinatalism had a frontman, David Benatar would be on the album cover. Born in South Africa in 1966, Benatar is the philosopher who took the gloomy vibes of Schopenhauer, Zapffe, and Cabrera, then wrapped them into one razor-sharp, logical package. His mic drop book, Better Never to Have Been, 2006, is the manifesto that dragged antinatalism from the underground into mainstream debates. At the heart of his work is the asymmetry argument, which is like a philosophical riddle that flips common sense upside down. The presence of pain equals always bad. The presence of pleasure equals good. The absence of pain equals good, even if no one experiences it. The absence of pleasure equals not bad, unless someone is deprived. Put simply, if you exist, you're guaranteed suffering, hunger, illness, heartbreak, taxes, take your pick. If you never exist, you avoid pain without missing out. That's the asymmetry. Not existing doesn't hurt, but existing always does. So the logical conclusion? It's better never to be born. This argument has made Benatar both famous and infamous. Critics accuse him of radical pessimism, and some even avoid debating him because he's too airtight. Supporters, meanwhile, see his work as a compassionate defense of mercy. If creation guarantees suffering, then not creating life is the only truly ethical choice. Benatar doesn't stop at theory. He connects it to practice. He points out population ethics issues like overpopulation, factory farming, climate collapse, and inequality, multiplying suffering at scale. For him, antinatalism isn't just personal despair, it's also a logical response to global crises. Long-term impact? Huge. Benatar put antinatalism on the 21st century map, into philosophy classrooms, bioethics journals, and viral YouTube debates. While many brush off antinatalist thinkers as dark poets or eccentrics, Benatar gave the idea a crisp academic backbone. In short, his philosophy leaves you with one haunting thought. By not being born, you're spared nothing but pain. Existence is the scam, and Benatar is the guy on stage shouting, "No refunds, no returns, better never to have been." Herman Vetter, the logician with no chill. If David Benatar is the smooth lead singer of antinatalism, Herman Vetter is the dead serious drummer in the back, making sure the rhythm never skips a beat. A German philosopher born in 1933, Vetter didn't want flowery language or poetic gloom. He wanted pure logic, syllogisms so technically consistent you could file them as court evidence. Vetter took inspiration from the pessimistic tradition, but zeroed in on one thing: consistency. For him, many defenses of birth were riddled with contradictions. People say life is a gift, yet this gift arrives burdened with suffering and ends in death. He argued that once you demand rational justification for reproduction, the whole pro-birth narrative falls apart. He sharpened some of Benatar's arguments, often overlapping with the asymmetry logic, but stressing it in stricter terms. For instance, if you claim it's good to create life because pleasure exists, you're logically forced to also claim it's bad not to, which makes the lives of the unborn mysteriously tragic, even though they're not around to complain. Vetter loved exposing these paradoxes. In this way, his style was less poetic and more corrective. He wasn't trying to comfort you or scare you, just corner you until you admitted, "You're right, there's no logical way to defend reproduction without contradictions." Kind of like a guy at a party poking holes in every joke. Only his jokes happen to be the entire purpose of human existence. Though less famous than Benatar or Zapffe, his work built philosophical backbone, ensuring antinatalism wasn't dismissed as emotional pessimism, but seen as a rigorous, rational position. His essays added credibility in academic debates on population ethics and moral theory. Long-term impact? Vetter might not be a household name, but in the intellectual family tree, he's the strict uncle who makes sure no one cheats on the logical rules. Where others gave despair color and poetry, he gave it cold precision. And his message is clear. If you want to justify having kids, you'd better bring airtight logic, because Vetter already tested your argument, and it didn't survive.